in a room buzzing with secrets just waiting to spill, where a single whisper could topple empires. What happens when a long-forgotten ally steps up to lay the truth bare? The hearing room wasn't quiet. It crackled with energy. Tripod cameras clicked into position with crisp snaps. Whispers of anticipation mixed with the warm scent of fresh coffee and the faint squeak of leather chairs shifting under restless bodies. This wasn't just another committee meeting. Everyone felt a storm coming. Nobody could guess how fierce it'd be. Up front, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat with unshakable calm, her fingers resting on a slim folder. She didn't fiddle with it nervously. That wasn't her way. Instead, she held it like a locked safe, packed with revelations ready to explode. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, like she was sizing up every player in a high-stakes poker game. Across the room, the MAGA crew formed a wall of defiance. Some leaned back, arms crossed, smirking like they knew something. Others typed furiously on their phones. And just behind them, outside the inner circle of power, sat Donald Trump himself, stiff as a boar, jaw tight, his face a mix of curiosity and calculation. The cameras loved him, but today the focus was slipping away, and everyone was ready to see where it landed. The gavel hit the block with a sharp thud. The Oversight Committee will now begin. The usual opening words floated out, barely noticed. Reporters leaned forward, lenses locked and loaded. Gut instinct told them this day would break all the rules. Then in a voice that cut through the hum like a knife, Crockett spoke. "Madam Chair," she began, "I've got a pressing request before we move forward." The chair looked up, knowing Crockett never brought up anything small. "Proceed, Congresswoman." Crockett stood folder in hand. "I'd like to call a witness who knows the ins and outs of what we're investigating today. This testimony, in my view, will wipe away any doubts about the facts." Trump's eyes narrowed. A few MAGA folks shifted uncomfortably. No extra witness was listed on the day's schedule. The chair asked, "And who is this witness?" Crockett locked eyes across the room as she said it. "Michael Hale." It was like tossing a match into dry brush. The room ignited. Voices erupted. Reporters spun toward the back doors. Hale's name hit hard for those in the know. He was Trump's go-to lawyer during the campaign's roughest days, but he'd vanished from the public eye for years. No interviews, no appearances. Like a ghost swallowed by the night, the doors flew open. There he was. Michael Hale walked in, flanked by two aides carrying a heavy box and a stuffed briefcase. Gone were the sleek suits he was known for. He wore a plain, dark outfit, tie, a bit loose, face unreadable. He looked older, maybe from years in the shadows, or the weight of what brought him here today. Every MAGA gaze locked onto him. You could practically hear their brains churning. "Why's he here? Who brought him? What's he got?" The chair cleared her throat. "Mr. Hale, you know you weren't scheduled to testify today." "I do," Hale replied softly, stepping in. "But Representative Crockett invited me, and I believe it's my duty to be here." The chair glanced at the committee counsel, then back to Crockett. "Any objections from the committee?" A MAGA member shot up. "Objection, Madam Chair. This is a straight-up ambush. This witness hasn't been cleared. Neither have his materials." But the chair raised a hand. "You'll have your time to question him. For now, he can proceed." The objection hung for a moment, then faded, leaving only the sound of Hale's steps to the witness table. The microphones picked up the soft scrape of his chair as he sat. An aide set the box beside him. Inside were stacks of binders and files, heavy not just in weight but in what they could mean. Crockett's expression didn't budge. She spoke to Hale, but her words were for the whole room. "Mr. Hale, for the record, please state your full name and your role tied to the person sitting behind the MAGA group." Hale didn't look back. "My name is Michael Andrew Hale. From 2016 to 2020, I served as personal legal counsel to Donald J. Trump." Even the court reporters paused for a split second before catching up. Crockett nodded. "And just to be clear, you're here on your own free will." "Yes," Hale said firmly. "No subpoena, no threats. I'm here because the truth belongs in the history books." His words landed like a slow-building thunderclap, shaking the room. People in the back leaned in closer. Photographers snapped away, catching Trump's quick flash of something sharp before it disappeared. Crockett kept going. "And you're prepared to take an oath?" "I am." The clerk swore him in. Hale's voice didn't waver. His right hand stayed up through the whole oath, eyes steady. As he lowered it, Crockett leaned in just enough for the mic to catch every word. "Mr. Hale, without getting into details yet, can you tell this committee whether your testimony today will cover the actions, decisions, and instructions given by Mr. Trump while you worked for him?" "Yes," Hale said plainly, "it will." It wasn't a loud statement. It wasn't shouted, but it made even the folks leaning against the walls stand straighter. Trump shifted in his seat for the first time. His lawyer whispered something urgently, but he didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on Hale, like a hawk watching something move in the tall grass. A MAGA member called out from across the table, voice cutting, "This is ridiculous. Are we really letting a former lawyer trash his old boss on live television?" But Crockett was ready. "The American people deserve transparency, and this witness says he has firsthand knowledge. That's what relevant testimony looks like." The chair let it stand. Hale reached into the briefcase at his side. The faint click of the metal latch sounded louder than it should have. He didn't pull anything out yet, just rested his hand inside, letting the moment settle over the room. Crockett glanced at the box by his feet. "Mr. Hale, is everything you brought today tied to your testimony?" "Yes," he said. "Every single item in this box, and this case, is evidence. All documented, verified, and critical to this committee's work." His words sent a strange ripple through the room. For some, it was the thrill of history unfolding right in front of them. For others, it was dread, knowing that once this came out, it couldn't be undone. From the back row, Trump leaned slightly to one side, trying to peek at the contents. But Hale didn't budge. His posture was calm, almost deliberate, like he knew the slower he moved, the more the room would hang on his every action. Crockett let a few beats of silence stretch before speaking again. "Mr. Hale, this committee wasn't told you'd be testifying today. Neither was the public. Your presence here is a surprise." "Yes," Hale said. "And a surprise means unwelcome to some." He didn't look at Trump when he said it. He didn't need to. The press section was now packed tight. Aides in the hallway craned their necks to catch a glimpse. Somewhere in the background, social media feeds were blowing up with guesses and hashtags popping up in real time. Crockett folded her hands. "Then let's get started." That was the moment. The point where the usual rhythm of a congressional hearing broke apart, and the room went from following rules to holding its breath. Part 2 would bring the first big shock. But Part 1 had already cracked open the door, letting everyone step just close enough to see the light without showing what was inside. Hale didn't start by flipping open a folder. He didn't clear his throat. He just looked at the chair, then at Crockett, and let his gaze sweep the room. It was a deliberate pause, heavy with meaning. Everyone knew his first words would set the stage for everything to come. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but steady. "I'm here today to support the questions being asked by Representative Jasmine Crockett. What if one bold statement could break loyalties that seemed unbreakable?" His words didn't shout. They didn't need to. In the back row, Trump's head tilted just a bit. Around him, a few MAGA members leaned forward, exchanging quick glances like they were confirming. Did he really just say that? The room rippled like a pond after a stone's toss. First, the press section buzzed. Then camera shutters fired off in bursts. On reporters' tablets live, social media feeds exploded into fast-scrolling text. Crockett didn't smile or gloat. She just sat back, letting the weight of his statement hang there, letting the cameras capture it without her needing to point it out. A MAGA member couldn't hold back. "Support her questions. You mean push her story?" Hale turned to him, steady as a rock. "I mean, I support her search for the truth. And if that truth makes someone I used to work for look bad, that's on the truth, not her." It wasn't a loud comeback, but it hit like one. Trump's jaw tightened, the movement small but noticeable. His fingers tapped the table twice, then stopped. The chair spoke up, voice sharp but fair. "Mr. Hale, the committee respects your right to speak freely under oath. Keep going." Hale nodded and leaned closer to the mic. For years, I sat in rooms where decisions shaped what the public heard. I saw what went out in press releases. I saw what stayed hidden in desk drawers. I defended choices I didn't agree with because it was my job. But a job doesn't wipe out your conscience. That's why I'm here now. His words landed hard. Even in the crowded room, you could feel the air shift, like a cold front moving in. Crockett kept her voice even. You understand, mister? Hale, that your statement is being broadcast live, and you're making these remarks on your own with no protection from legal consequences. I do, Hale said. I'm not here to dodge consequences. I've carried this weight too long. Near the side wall, a reporter's pen stopped scratching. She looked up, sensing the story was bigger than expected. Hale's eyes flicked briefly toward the back of the room. Not right at Trump, but close enough to make the point. When you're in that inner circle, you see things nobody else does. You hear the raw truth before it's polished for the public. And sometimes you're asked to help polish it. He let the silence work for him before going on. But there's a difference between protecting privacy and hiding actions that weaken the systems we all rely on. I realized silence wasn't loyalty. Silence was enabling. That phrase hit home. Silence was enabling. Crockett leaned in just enough to keep the pace steady. So, Mr. Hale, are you saying you have firsthand knowledge of actions by Mr. Trump that this committee hasn't seen documented? Yes, he said without hesitation. Trump's lawyer shifted uneasily. A MAGA member muttered something too quiet for the mic. The chair tapped her pen once, bringing focus back. Mr. Hale, direct your remarks to the whole committee. Hale nodded. Everything I'll say today and everything I've brought, I'm ready to enter into the official record. That means it's public. That's the whole point. Crockett's tone stayed steady, but you could feel the anticipation underneath. And for the record, did anyone on this committee pressure you or promise you anything for your testimony? No, Hale said firmly. Nobody pressured me. Nobody offered immunity, money, or any kind of benefit. If anything, I expect this will make my life harder. But doing what's right sometimes costs you. His words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded lived. The room stayed quiet for a moment too long. That silence became its own kind of emphasis. Finally, the chair signaled. Continue with your account, Mr. Hale. Hale didn't open the briefcase yet. He rested his hands on the table and looked straight into one of the cameras. It was a small move, but intentional. I know people watching have already made up their minds about me. Some will call me a hero, others a traitor. I'm neither. I'm here to tell the truth as I know it. And if that truth lines up with Representative Crockett's questions, it's because she's asking the right ones. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the air vents and the soft whir of a camera lens adjusting. Then someone coughed in the back, the sound oddly loud in the stillness, breaking the tension just enough to move forward. Crockett glanced at the chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to mark this witness's statement as Exhibit A for the record. So ordered, the chair replied. The clerk wrote it down. And in that small routine moment, the statement became more than a headline. It was now part of the United States Congress's official record. The political world outside hadn't fully caught up to what was happening, but inside, everyone with a seat or even standing room knew they were watching something that couldn't be undone. Trump leaned back slightly, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. If he felt anything beyond irritation, it didn't show, but his jaw was tighter than it was an hour ago. Crockett took a slow breath, like she was lining up her next play. Mr. Hale, let's talk about why you chose today to come forward. Hale's gaze didn't waver, because timing matters, because the truth hits hardest when people are still deciding what's real. And because if I waited any longer, I'd be letting a wrong version of history take hold forever. That last line sparked a few quiet murmurs. You could almost hear reporters mentally drafting their stories. Former Trump lawyer steps up to stop a false history from taking root. Crockett sat back. She didn't need to hurry. The hook was set. And in the quiet pause before the first piece of hard evidence came in, part 3, she let the public and the man behind the MAGA row know exactly what they were up against. What if a secret memo could unravel years of carefully hidden truths? Crockett didn't touch her notes. She didn't glance at the chair. Her eyes stayed locked on Michael Hale, like she knew what was coming and wanted everyone to hear it just as she did. "Mr. Hale," she said slowly, "you've said you're ready to put evidence into the record. Let's start with the first item you think this committee and the American people need to see." Hale leaned down, opened his briefcase, and pulled out a single folder. Not a stack, not a binder, just one folder. But it was thick enough that the papers inside pressed against the edges. He placed it in front of him, fingers resting lightly on top. "This," he said, "is an internal memo I drafted while working as Mr. Trump's personal attorney. It's dated March 14th, 2019. The subject line is about instructions for handing over documents to the Oversight Committee." From the MAGA side, a member leaned forward. "What exactly are you getting at?" Hale stayed calm. "I'm not getting at anything. I'm reading the actual words." He opened the folder. The soft sound of paper sliding against paper cut through the quiet. Reporters in the gallery leaned in, pens ready. "This memo," Hale went on, "was sent to 3 senior members of the campaign's legal team. All 3 signed off on it. The instruction was clear. Delay, obstruct, and in the memo's own words, make sure nothing gets handed over until we've filtered out sensitive items." Crockett raised an eyebrow. "And by filtered out, what did that mean in practice?" Hale flipped to the second page. "It meant removing any materials that could show financial conflicts, contract violations, or any pattern of working with groups under federal investigation." Those are the memo's own words, not mine. The room's energy shifted. Hale had moved from general principles to specific accusations. A MAGA member slammed a hand on the table. "That's outrageous. How do we know this isn't made up?" Hale didn't look up from the paper. "The proof is in the fact that all 3 signers put their initials on it in ink. They're handwriting their dates. You can have it checked by experts if you want." Trump's eyes flicked to the folder. His expression was harder to read now. Not the usual easy confidence, but something sharper, colder. Crockett spoke again, her voice steady. "Mr. Hale is your former client's signature on that memo," No Hale said, "but it comes with a separate authorization note. That note does have his signature, and it directly mentions this memo." For a moment, you could feel the whole room take a breath. A collective inhale. The press gallery's cameras clicked faster. Crockett didn't pause. "Do you have that note?" "I do." She pointed to the evidence table. "Then let's see it." Hale reached back into the folder and pulled out a single page in a clear plastic sleeve. The overhead lights caught the faint shine of the cover. "This note," he said, "is dated the same day as the memo. It's addressed to one of the 3 signers. It says, and I'm quoting, 'Exactly proceed as discussed in Michael's memo. We can't give them what they're looking for.' And then there's the signature." Crockett asked, "You're confident the signature is real?" "Yes," Hale said plainly. "I was in the room when it was signed." The MAGA member who objected earlier leaned back now, arms crossed tightly. They didn't say another word. Trump's lawyer whispered something in his ear, but Trump's eyes stayed fixed on the folder, like staring at it long enough might change what was inside. The chair stepped in. "Mr. Hale, just to be clear, are you saying this memo and note are directly tied to an order to withhold materials from this very committee?" "That's right," Hale replied. "And I can back that up with emails between me, the 3 signers, and the office of the person sitting behind the MAGA group." Crockett leaned in. "Do you have those emails?" "I do," Hale said. "They're saved and backed up in multiple secure places. And yes, they're here with me today." The room went completely still. Only the slow turn of a camera tracking Hale's face broke the quiet. A reporter in the back mouthed "wow" to another. Crockett let the pause linger just long enough for everyone in the room and watching at home to feel the weight of what was being said. Then she asked, "Mr. Hale, why did you keep these materials?" Hale's answer was simple but heavy. "Because I knew a day would come when the official story wouldn't match what really happened. And when that day came, I didn't want it to be my word against anyone else's. I wanted the truth to stand on its own." In the social media feeds, the hashtag self-evident started popping up alongside truth on the table from part 2. The chair made it official. The committee will mark this memo and authorization note as Exhibits B and C. They'll be entered into the record. The clerk stepped forward to collect the documents, sealing them in labeled evidence envelopes. The sound of the seal snapping shut echoed through the microphones. Small, but final. For the first time since the hearing began, Trump leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. His lips moved slightly as he spoke to his lawyer, but his eyes never left. Hale. Crockett glanced at him for just a second before turning back to the witness. Mr. Hale, is there anything about this first piece of evidence the committee should understand before we move on? Yes, Hale said. He folded his hands together on the table. The memo wasn't a one-off order. It was part of a bigger pattern. One I believe this committee will see clearly once the rest of the documents are reviewed. This wasn't about protecting national security or personal information. It was about shielding a network of actions and relationships from scrutiny. The phrase network of actions and relationships hung in the air. Crockett didn't push further yet. She knew how to pace things. The audience needed to sit with that image of a network before the next thread was pulled. The chair announced a quick procedural note, but nobody was listening. They were all watching Hale close the folder, his fingertips lingering for a second on the edge, like he understood the symbolic weight of setting it down. Crockett's voice was steady, but there was a hint of an edge. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Let's move forward. And just like that, the room braced itself for whatever was coming next. What if an email from the top proved impossible to ignore? Crockett didn't need her notes. She'd been waiting for this moment, and judging by the room's hush, so had everyone else. Mr. Hale, she said, her voice firm but deliberate, you've mentioned emails that tie directly to the memo in the signed note. Is there one that stands out? One this committee and the American people need to hear right now. Hale didn't hesitate. Yes, he said, reaching into his briefcase again. One in particular. He pulled out another plastic sleeve, this one holding a single printed email. The subject line was visible before he even spoke. About holding back submissions marked urgent. This email, Hale began, came from Donald Trump's personal account to me, with a copy to one of the memo's 3 signers. It's dated March 14, 2019, same as the memo and note. The timestamp is 9:47 p.m. Eastern Time. He slid the document closer to the microphone so the text would be clear for the record. It says, make sure they never see this version. I don't care what it takes. Just get it done. Gasps weren't common in a hearing room, but a quiet one slipped out now. Quick, but unmistakable. Crockett leaned in slightly. Mr. Hale, are you certain this email came straight from Mr. Trump's account? Yes, Hale said. I received it myself. It came from the email address I used to communicate with him for years. The server logs confirm the sending IP matches his main location at the time, and the metadata, which I have here, verifies the origin. The chair spoke sharply, cutting through the low buzz. The committee will include those technical records as part of the evidence. Hale placed a second page, the metadata printout, on top of the email. Crockett's tone stayed steady. And the phrase, never see this version. Can you explain what version he was talking about? Hale tapped a line of text with his finger. He was referring to an earlier draft of the financial disclosure documents. That draft included transactions, specifically wire transfers, that were removed from the final submission. Trump's lawyer whispered something urgently in his ear. Trump leaned back, shaking his head slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. A MAGA member spoke up. Mr. Hale, isn't it possible you're misreading the context? Couldn't this have been about protecting sensitive information for security reasons? Hale's answer was calm, but razor sharp. Number. And I can say that with certainty, because in the same email chain, just 2 replies down, there's a follow-up from one of the signers. It says, understood. We'll clean out the problem entries before the final version is sent. Crockett jumped on that phrase. Problem entries. Did they spell out what those entries were? Yes, Hale said. In a later email also here, they listed the specific transfers that were to be removed. All of them involved a shell company registered overseas tied to someone under federal investigation at the time. The chair leaned forward now, her pen hovering over her notepad. And you have those follow-up emails? I do, Hale replied. They're part of the larger archive, but the one I just read is the clearest example of a direct order from Mr. Trump himself. Crockett's eyes flicked to the press gallery for a split second, not to acknowledge them, but to make sure the moment was hitting home. She knew what she was doing. Trump's posture had shifted again. He wasn't leaning forward anymore, not in his usual engaged stance. Now he sat back, almost like he was trying to put physical distance between himself and the evidence on the table. Mr. Hale Crockett continued, "Why is this email important, in your view?" Hale took a slow breath before answering, "Because it takes away any chance of denial. You can argue about hearsay, you can question someone's memory, but a written order from the person at the very top telling his own team to hide a specific version of a document, that's not open to interpretation." The statement had weight, not fiery, not dramatic, but heavy, the kind that sticks in the air even after the next question. Crockett let the silence do its work before speaking again. "Madam Chair, I move to mark this email and its metadata as Exhibits D and E." "So ordered," the chair said. The clerk stepped forward again, slipping the plastic sleeves into fresh evidence envelopes, sealing them with that same crisp sound. The microphones caught it, making the moment feel final. In the social media feeds, new hashtags started flashing. "Never see this version," and "Can't ignore email." From the corner of the gallery, a veteran reporter whispered to a colleague, "That's the one. That's tomorrow morning's headline." Crockett sat back slightly, her face unreadable, but inside she knew they'd just crossed a line. The memo and note had set the foundation. This email was the first wall built on top of it. The chair looked around the room. "Any more questions from members before we move on?" Nobody spoke up. Even the MAGA side stayed quiet, their expressions ranging from stone cold to barely holding back frustration. Crockett turned back to Hale. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. We'll move on to the financial details next. But before we do, is there anything you want to add about this email for the record?" Hale thought for a moment. "Just this. When I got that email, I knew it crossed a line. But at the time I told myself staying quiet was okay because the truth would come out some other way. It didn't. It almost didn't come out at all. That's why I kept it." His words hung there, a quiet admission that carried deep meaning. Crockett gave a small nod. "Understood." And with that, the hearing shifted. The room was now leaning forward as one ready, maybe even bracing for what Hale would reveal next. What if a multi-million-dollar deal tied corruption right to the heart of power? Could it shatter everything we thought we knew? Crockett didn't miss a beat. The rhythm was locked in now. Statement, evidence, impact. She leaned toward her microphone, her voice even sharper. "Mr. Hale, let's move to the next piece of evidence. You've pointed to a financial transaction that this committee needs to review right away." Hale rested his hands on the table, taking his time. "Yes. A wire transfer of $2.4 million from a private account controlled by Donald Trump to an entity that on paper doesn't exist in any official U.S. company registry." That alone sent a jolt through the room. Pens scratched faster, and press gallery cameras fired off in bursts. Crockett stayed steady. "What's the name of that entity?" Hale reached into the box at his feet and pulled out a binder with a single red tab. He flipped it open and read Hamilton West Consulting Incorporated, registered in Cyprus. Tied to a P.O. box in Nicosia. No listed employees, no physical office. Trump's lawyer leaned in again, whispering so intensely it caught eyes around the room. Trump didn't break his stare on Hale. And when Crockett pressed, "When did this transfer happen?" Hale slid a printed transaction record onto the evidence table. January 23, 2020. The originating account, which I can confirm was under Mr. Trump's direct control, wired $2,400,000 to Hamilton West Consulting. The transfer went through a bank in Luxembourg. The chair spoke up. "Mr. Hale, are these banking records verified?" "Yes," Hale replied. "They've been checked by the issuing bank, and I brought certified copies along with the original transfer order, which includes the signed authorization. Crockett nodded slowly. And why does this transaction matter to our hearing? Because Hale said 3 months later, Hamilton West Consulting, that shell company, was awarded a U.S. government contract worth $50 million. The agency that gave it, the Department of Infrastructure and Development, had its leaders meet privately with Mr. Trump 2 weeks before the contract was announced. The room felt the ripple, no mistaking it. Gallery members glanced at each other. Journalists scribbled like crazy, and in the social media feeds, new hashtags like 2.4 million and shell to contract started trending. A MAGA member tried to cut in. Mr. Hale, you're making it sound like you're accusing someone of bribery. Hale didn't raise his voice, but his words sliced clean. I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm stating the facts as they're documented in these records. The link between the transfer and the contract isn't my opinion. It's a matter of timeline and paper trail. Crockett leaned back slightly, letting the moment settle before pushing on. Mr. Hale, were you personally involved in approving or handling this transaction? Yes, Hale admitted. I drafted the internal memo that called the payment a strategic consulting expense. That's the term used in the paperwork. And did that term match the real purpose of the payment? Crockett asked. No, Hale said flat out. There was no consulting, no strategic service. It was just a pass-through. The room went silent. Even the MAGA side didn't interrupt. Crockett looked to the chair. Madam Chair, I move to mark the banking records, transfer authorization, and internal memo as exhibits F, G, and H. So ordered, the chair confirmed. The clerk moved fast, collecting the documents, sealing them in evidence envelopes, and labeling them one by one. The click of the seal echoed in the microphones again, each one sounding like another nail hammered in. Trump's posture shifted once more, leaning back, arms crossed, his expression caught between impatience and calculation. It wasn't the relaxed vibe he started with. It was tighter, more guarded. Crockett turned back to Hale. Mr. Hale, was this the only transaction like this during your time as counsel? Hale shook his head. Number. It was the biggest, but not the only one. That answer landed like a promise that the story was far from over. Crockett let the pause breathe, then asked, why did you keep a record of this one? Hale's voice stayed level. Because its size made it impossible to forget. And even back then, I had a feeling it would matter someday. From the gallery, a seasoned reporter whispered to a younger one, this is the money trail. If they can prove intent, everything changes. The social media feeds kept moving. Lines of text flying faster than anyone could read. People were connecting dots, guessing names, calling for deeper investigations. The chair cleared her throat. Mr. Hale, for the record, is it your sworn testimony that this payment wasn't for legitimate services and that it led to a major government contract for the same entity? Yes, Hale said. That's my sworn testimony. Nobody missed how sworn testimony hung in the air. Crockett didn't lean into the drama. She didn't need to. Instead, she sat back, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the faces, the tension, the unspoken agreement that they just stepped into dangerous territory. Then she spoke again, her voice calm but deliberate. Mr. Hale will ask more about the other transactions you've mentioned. But for now, this committee takes note. The $2.4 million payment to Hamilton West Consulting is now part of the public record. The chair nodded once, making it official. And with that, the room sank into a heavier silence. The kind that comes when the stakes have just gone up, and everyone knows it. What if a secret recording caught words that could bring down giants? Crockett didn't shuffle papers this time. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on Michael Hale. Mr. Hale, the committee has received written records, bank documents, and emails from you today. But you've hinted at something different, something that speaks with a voice. The room perked up. A voice could only mean one thing. Hale didn't crack a smile. Yes, he said. I have an audio recording. It's never been released. The chair adjusted her glasses. Describe this recording, Mr. Hale. Hale pulled a small black digital recorder from his briefcase. He set it on the table like it weighed a ton. This was recorded on March 3rd, 2020. The place, a private meeting room at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. present, were Donald Trump, me, and two other senior advisors. Nobody else knew the device was running. A MAGA member snapped from their row. "So you're admitting you secretly recorded your boss?" Hale didn't flinch. "I'm admitting I recorded a meeting where I believed illegal instructions were being given. Under D.C. 2 law, as a participant, I had the right to record, and I'm here to share that recording with the committee." Trump's lawyer leaned in, whispering fiercely. Trump's eyes narrowed, but he stayed silent. Crockett kept her eyes on Hale. "And what's on that recording?" Hale's voice was steady. "You'll hear Donald Trump talking about the $2.4 million payment we just discussed. In his own words, he says, 'This is how we keep things quiet. This is how we make sure the right people stay with us.'" A wave of shock rolled through the room. Even for those used to political storms, hearing those words in this context was something else. Crockett asked, "You're sure that's his voice?" "I was 2 feet away from him," Hale replied. "I worked with him for years. I'd know his voice in my sleep." The chair cut in. "Mr. Hale, are you ready to submit the original unedited recording along with its metadata to this committee?" "Yes," Hale said, reaching into the briefcase again. He pulled out a sealed, labeled evidence bag with a USB drive inside. "This is the master copy. It's been verified by an independent audio expert. The chain of custody is solid." The clerk stepped forward, taking the bag, carefully sealing it in another envelope before labeling it Exhibit I. The sound of the seal snapping shut rang louder than it should have. Crockett leaned in slightly. "Mr. Hale, for the record, can you tell us what else is said on that recording?" "Yes," Hale said. He glanced at a notepad, not to read but to keep his pace. "After the comment about keeping things quiet, Mr. Trump says Hamilton West Consulting will earn their favor back with a timely award. That's a direct reference to the $50 million government contract." The silence in the room grew deeper. The phrase "earn their favor back" carried its own weight. A MAGA member spoke up again. "Mr. Hale, how do we know this isn't taken out of context?" Hale's response was measured. "Because the recording is 32 minutes long. You'll hear the whole conversation start to finish. Nothing's cut. Nothing's missing. And the context, unfortunately for some, only makes it clearer." Trump's jaw tightened, the muscles visibly flexing. His lawyer scribbled something on a yellow legal pad and slid it over. Trump didn't touch it. Crockett kept her tone even, but there was a sharp undercurrent. "So to sum up for the record, you've provided a verified audio recording with Mr. Trump's voice discussing the $2.4 million transfer and the government contract that followed." "That's correct," Hale confirmed. "And you've given us both the master copy and the verification materials?" "Yes." Crockett sat back, letting the testimony's weight settle over the room. Nobody moved for a few seconds. In the social media feeds, hashtags multiplied. "He said it, audio doesn't lie, 32 minutes. Finally, the chair spoke, her voice carrying the moment's gravity. "Let the record show this committee has received Exhibits I and J, the audio recording, and its verification report." The clerk finished labeling the envelopes. The press gallery erupted into a quiet chaos of whispered phone calls, text to editors, and rapid typing. Crockett looked at Hale. "Mr. Hale, I've got one more question before we move to the next area of evidence. When you decided to record that meeting, what was going through your mind?" Hale's expression didn't change, but his answer had a quiet depth. "I was thinking about what would happen if I didn't. I was thinking about the patterns I'd seen for years. People who spoke up without proof, and how easily they were brushed off. I didn't want to be brushed off. I wanted the truth to stand on its own." Crockett nodded once. "Understood." And with that, the air in the hearing room felt thicker, heavier. They'd moved from paper and signatures to a raw, human voice. The kind of evidence no amount of spin could erase. The chair tapped her gavel lightly, more to reset than to scold. "Proceed." Everyone in the room knew what that meant. The next step was going to dig even deeper. What if a buried scandal from years ago could unravel today's truths? Crockett didn't touch her notes. She didn't need them. The audio recording had shifted the ground under the room, and she knew exactly how to press that advantage. Mr. Hale, she began, you've talked about a $2.4 million transfer, a $50 million contract, and a recording where Mr. Trump mentions both. But you've told committee staff these events tie back to something earlier. I want you to explain that connection now. Hale nodded, already knowing where she was headed. The pattern didn't start in 2020. In fact, one of the same people linked to Hamilton West was at the heart of a controversy in 2017, a controversy that got buried before it could see the light of day. The press gallery jumped to life. Pens scratched faster, fingers tapped wildly, heads turned to each other. What controversy? Crockett asked. Hale pulled a slim file from the box. In 2017, there was a federal infrastructure grant worth $120 million. The winning bidder was a company called Triarch Systems. On paper, it was an American firm. In reality, its majority ownership traced back to the same offshore group that later controlled Hamilton West. The chair leaned in. Are you stating for the record that the ownership groups were connected? Yes, Hale said. And more than that, I was in the room for a call where the offshore owners were discussed openly. The phrase they used was, they've been useful before they'll be useful again. That line hit hard, like a punch you didn't see coming. Crockett kept her eyes on him. And was Mr. Trump part of that call? Hale's answer was immediate. Yes. Trump shifted in his seat, but stayed quiet. Crockett leaned toward her mic just a bit. So when the $2.4 million transfer to Hamilton West happened in 2020, you recognized the names involved. Exactly, Hale said. It wasn't a random connection. It was the same network operating the same way with the same goal. Using government contracts to secure loyalty. The gallery murmured softly. The social media feeds were now spitting out hashtags like same network and buried 2017. Crockett's voice stayed calm, but the edge was there. Why didn't this 2017 issue ever come to light? Hale's answer was blunt. Because certain people in oversight roles decided it wasn't worth chasing. Some of them are still sitting in this room today. That sparked a quick stir from the MAGA side. One member leaned forward, pointing a finger. Name them if you're so sure. Hale met his gaze without blinking. That's not my call to make in this hearing, but the records are in my archive. If subpoenaed, they'll show exactly who knew what and when. The chair stepped in. The committee will note that statement. Crockett let the silence hold a moment longer before closing the loop. So to sum up, the Hamilton West payment and contract in 2020 weren't a one-time thing. They were part of an ongoing setup that started at least 3 years earlier, involving the same offshore players and the same misuse of federal resources for private gain. That's correct, Hale confirmed. Crockett leaned back, letting the words sink in. This wasn't just about one deal anymore. It was a system, a machine, and the people in the room and watching at home could feel that the next part would only go deeper. What happens when the accused finally speaks? But his words fall apart under pressure. For most of the morning, Trump had stayed silent, listening, whispering to his lawyer, letting his allies speak for him. But after Hale's last statement, he leaned forward, pressing his palms flat on the table. The microphone caught the faint thud. Madam Chair, he said, his voice louder than it had been all day. This whole thing is a setup. That guy, he pointed at Hale, is a bitter ex-employee chasing attention. He'll say anything to make himself look like a big deal. The MAGA members nodded along, a few muttering, "That's right," under their breath. Crockett didn't move. She let him talk. Trump kept going. He's twisting old conversations, taking things out of context. That recording, you can make anyone say anything these days. Ever heard of editing fake audio? This is nothing but a political circus. The press gallery's cameras went wild, not because of what he said, but because they knew this was Trump's first shot at taking back the narrative today. Crockett leaned forward slowly, her voice calm but precise. Mr. Trump, are you stating under oath that the voice on that recording isn't yours? Trump paused, just long enough for everyone to notice. I'm saying you can't trust what you hear unless you've got proof it's real. Crockett's eyebrow lifted slightly. We have proof, Mr. Trump. A forensic analysis verified the recording, and the expert who did it signed a sworn affidavit. Would you like that affidavit read into the record right now? The room went dead quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Trump's lips pressed into a thin line. Number, I think we've wasted enough time on a disgruntled ex-employee. Hale stayed silent, hands folded in front of him. His calmness only made Trump's words seem weaker. Crockett didn't raise her voice, but her words hit like a laser. Mr. Trump, dismissing evidence doesn't make it go away. Questioning someone's motives doesn't erase their proof. The chair stepped in, keeping control. We'll move forward with the scheduled questions. The witness has provided documents, and the committee will treat them as valid unless proven otherwise. Trump leaned back, arms crossed again. His attempt to take charge had fizzled, leaving only the echo of his dodge. In the social media feeds, comments poured in, half mocking the pause before his denial, half picking apart his refusal to challenge the affidavit directly. Hashtags like weak comeback and proof stands started trending alongside the earlier ones. Crockett took a sip of water, her gaze never leaving Trump. Mr. Hale, thank you for your patience. Let's keep going, because the next piece of evidence will make it clear this is about facts, not feelings. The room's atmosphere shifted again. Trump had spoken, but he hadn't regained control. If anything, his try had given Crockett an opening, and everyone could feel she was about to use it. What if one small device could expose a hidden empire of secrets? Crockett leaned back for a moment, letting the tension ease after Trump's weak counter. Then she leaned forward again, hands clasped like she was pulling the final card in a long, careful game. Mr. Hale, she said, you've given us memos, emails, bank records, and an audio recording. But you've told the committee you have something more. Something that holds it all in its original form. Hale nodded. That's right. He reached down to the box at his feet and pulled out a small matte black USB drive. It looked ordinary, but the way he held it made it feel heavier than anything else he'd brought. He set it on the evidence table with a quiet tap. This drive, Hale began, contains the complete archive of my records from my time as Donald Trump's attorney. Every memo, every email, every bank transaction, every audio clip, all in their original formats. And yes, it includes things I haven't shown today. The gallery broke into hushed whispers. Even veteran reporters swapped glances, eyebrows raised. Crockett asked, and has this archive been protected to ensure it's real? Yes, Hale replied. It's encrypted and stored in multiple secure locations. This is one of 3 identical drives. Each has a digital fingerprint, a hash value that confirms nothing's been changed. The verification report is on the drive too. The chair leaned forward. Mr. Hale, have you shared this archive with anyone else? Yes, Hale said plainly. At 8:15 this morning, I delivered a copy of this drive to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Another copy is with my lawyer. Trump's eyes tightened, his jaw clenching again. His lawyer scribbled something fast and slid it toward him, but Trump didn't pick it up. Crockett kept her voice steady. Mr. Hale, for the record, why did you choose to give this archive to the FBI before testifying today? Because Hale said I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened in this room, the evidence couldn't be buried or destroyed. Once the FBI has it, it's out of my hands. It lives beyond this hearing. The room shifted. It wasn't just about the hearing anymore. Hale had moved the game to a whole new field. A MAGA member tried to interrupt. Madam Chair, this is outrageous. But the chair cut him off. The witness will finish his statement. Hale looked right into one of the cameras, his voice firm. This drive holds the truth. It's not about personal loyalty or party loyalty. It's about accountability. And that's why, as of this morning, it's in the hands of people who can act on it. Crockett let his words sink in before speaking again. Madam Chair, I move that this black USB drive and its contents be marked as Exhibit K, and that a forensic copy be made for the committee's secure archive. So ordered, the chair said. The clerk stepped forward with a fresh evidence bag, slipping the USB inside, sealing it with a sharp snap. The microphones caught the sound. It felt almost like a ceremony, the moment when years of secrets moved from private hands to public custody. In the social media feeds, hashtags Black USB and everything inside started trending in seconds. Trump sat back in his chair, arms crossed tighter than before. He hadn't said a word since the USB appeared. Crockett didn't smile, but her tone carried steel. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. We now have your full archive in the record." The chair looked over the room. "We'll move forward with the remaining testimony." But everyone in that room, and watching at home, knew the black USB wasn't just another piece of evidence. It was a vault. And sooner or later, it was going to be opened. What happens when the powerful stay silent, and their silence speaks louder than words? The black USB was sealed, labeled, and placed on the evidence table, but its presence lingered like a shadow nobody could shake. Crockett turned her gaze to Trump. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Mr. Trump, you've heard the witness submit his entire archive into the record. Memos, emails, bank records, audio, and more. This is your chance to respond." For a split second, Trump looked like he might lean forward. His lawyer shifted beside him, whispering in his ear. Trump shook his head once slowly and stayed put. The chair waited. "Mr. Trump, are you going to make a statement?" Silence. The cameras caught it, the stillness, the tightness in his jaw, the way his eyes stayed fixed on the table instead of the people around him. Crockett didn't let it slide. "Let the record show that the former president has chosen not to address the evidence at this time." That line hit hard. The press gallery scribbled it down fast. The social media feeds lit up with hashtags no response, and he said nothing. Trump's lawyer leaned in again, speaking low. Trump gave a small shrug, his arms crossing over his chest. It was the closest thing to an answer anyone would get. Crockett straightened in her chair. "Mr. Hale, you've put a lot on the table today. And now it's here, not just in this room, but in the hands of the FBI. I want the American people to remember one thing. Silence doesn't erase evidence. It doesn't make it less real. It just delays the moment it has to be faced." The chair tapped her gavel softly. "The witness will continue. We'll move to the next phase." But the moment was already carved in stone. Trump had been given the floor and left it empty. For viewers at home, it wasn't just about what was said in this hearing. It was about what wasn't. And that silence spoke louder than any speech could. What happens when defiance storms out, leaving the truth to stand alone? The chair's gavel barely touched the block before the first wave hit. A MAGA member, 2 seats down from Trump, suddenly pushed his chair back the legs, scraping the floor with a harsh screech. "I'm not sticking around for this clown show," he said, his voice slicing through the room. Without waiting for permission, he stood and strode toward the exit, his aides scrambling to grab his briefcase. The cameras followed him. The walkout wasn't planned, but it was going to lead every news ticker within the hour. Trump didn't budge. His arms stayed crossed, his eyes fixed somewhere past the evidence table, like he was staring at a point nobody else could see. Meanwhile, Hale stayed at the witness table, hands folded, completely unshaken. If the walkout was meant to rattle him, it failed. Crockett leaned slightly toward her microphone. "Let the record show that a member has chosen to leave the hearing rather than face the evidence on the table." The chair nodded, noted. The press gallery sprang into action, quiet but coordinated. Reporters slipped toward the side door to get to the hallway before the walkout, knowing the images and sound bites outside might be just as big as anything said inside. Within seconds of the gavel's recess, tap the room turned into organized chaos. Hale stood, and a semicircle of cameras and microphones formed around him. "Mr. Hale, why today were you threatened before coming forward? Is there more on that USB?" Hale's answers were short, sharp, and gave nothing away beyond the record. "I came when I was ready. No, I wasn't threatened. Yes, the archive has more." The shortness of his replies only made the press hungrier. Crockett, still seated, glanced at the gallery with a calm satisfaction. This wasn't the end. It was the turning point. The black USB was sealed. The FBI had a copy, and the former president had chosen silence. In the social media feeds, hashtags walked out, and what now climbed fast, joining the list from earlier in the day. For those in the room, it was clear the mood had changed. This wasn't just testimony anymore. It was the start of a storm that was about to spread far beyond these walls. The hallway outside was a wall of noise. Camera shutters firing voices, shouting over each other, news alerts pinging on reporters' phones. The air felt charged, like the calm before a summer thunderstorm breaks loose. In a world hungry for truth, what if one voice could change what justice means for everyone? Inside, the committee gathered again for closing statements. Crockett sat poised, her notes untouched. She didn't need them anymore. The chair motioned to her. "Representative Crockett, you have the floor." Crockett stood, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who knew the day had already changed history. Today, this committee received memos, emails, verified bank transfers, a forensic audio recording, and a complete encrypted archive, all from someone who worked inside the very circle we're tasked with examining. Every item is now part of the official record. Every item is in the hands of federal investigators. And in this same room, when given the chance to respond, the person at the center of these questions chose silence. She let that line hang for a moment, giving it space to sink in. This isn't about picking sides. It's not about loyalty to one person or one party. It's about loyalty to the truth. And the truth doesn't run from evidence. The truth doesn't walk out of a room. The truth doesn't hide on a USB drive waiting for the right moment to come out. It lives in the light, or it dies in the dark. The press gallery was locked on her. Every camera pointed forward. She went on, her voice sharpening just enough to leave a mark. "I know there are people watching who've been told to see this as a game, a score to win or lose. But games end. Government's justice and public trust can't be treated like points on a scoreboard." What we saw today wasn't a win for one side. It was a step forward for every American who still believes power should answer to the people. Trump didn't move. His lawyer kept his eyes down. Hale watched silently, hands still folded. Crockett's voice softened, but her words hit harder. "To everyone listening, whether you agreed with me before this hearing or not, remember this. Betrayal isn't walking away from a person. Betrayal is walking away from the truth. And if we keep protecting the truth only when it's convenient, we'll lose more than a hearing. We'll lose the very idea that this country belongs to its people." The chair's gavel struck once. This hearing is adjourned. The sound was sharp and final. Outside the scene was instant chaos. Reporters swarmed Hale as cameras swung toward Crockett, stepping into the hallway. Phones buzzed in pockets and purses. Across social media, the day's hashtags dominated the top 10. "Truth on the table, black USB," he said. It walked out. By evening, every major news outlet led with the same headline. "Former Trump lawyer testifies against him, hands full evidence to FBI." In living rooms and on phone screens across America, people replayed Crockett's closing words. Some heard accountability, others a challenge, but everyone heard the same message. The truth had been spoken in the open, and it couldn't be taken back. For those who stayed until the final moment, the story didn't just end. It stuck with them. Not because of the drama or even the revelations, but because of the reminder woven through every question, every piece of evidence, every pause before an answer. The truth isn't fragile. It doesn't need protection. It needs a voice. And today it had one. What can we learn when one person's courage to speak the truth reshapes the future? Michael Hale's testimony in that electric hearing room isn't just a political firestorm. It's a lesson plan for living with purpose. At its heart, this story is about the power of truth, the price of staying quiet, and the guts it takes to act when everything's on the line. Whether you're tackling a tough day at work, sorting out a family argument, or facing a personal choice that keeps you up at night, these lessons hit home far beyond the halls of Congress. First, truth needs to be spoken even when it's hard. Hale could have kept his head down, stayed comfortable, and avoided the spotlight, but he stepped up because he knew the truth deserved to be heard. In our own lives, we face moments where keeping quiet feels like the easy road. Maybe it's letting a coworker's wrong idea slide to avoid a clash, or not speaking up when a friend's making a bad call. But as Hale showed, staying silent can make you part of the problem. Speaking up even in small ways, like clearing up a misunderstanding or backing someone who's being treated unfairly, plants seeds of honesty that spread. It's not about making a big scene. It's about staying true in the everyday moments that add up. Second, courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you act anyway. Hale said flat out that his testimony might make his life tougher, but he did it because doing nothing would cost more. We all run into situations where doing the right thing feels like a risk. Calling out a shady move at work, confronting a loved one about a harmful habit, or owning up to a mistake. Courage is about weighing what you might lose against what's right and choosing to act. Start small. Admit a small screw-up instead of dodging it, or speak up for a coworker's idea, even if it's not the popular one. Those choices build strength that grows over time. Finally, proof beats stories every time. Hale's archive, memos, emails, recordings, wasn't just a pile of stuff. It was hard evidence that backed up his claims. In our lives, we can't always expect people to take our word for it. Whether it's keeping track of your work on a project to show your contribution, or saving receipts for a deal, having solid proof makes sure you're not dismissed. It's practical. Save those emails, jot down notes from meetings, or keep a journal of your goals to see how far you've come. These habits ground your truth in a world that loves to twist narratives. The fallout from that hearing shows us that truth and courage aren't just big ideas. They're choices we make every day. Each time we pick honesty over ease, action over fear, or proof over excuses, we're not just shaping our own path, we're lighting the way for others. Like Hale, we can all be voices for what's right, no matter how small the stage seems.